All right, so what's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to the DenofTruth. So today we've got someone who I've been trying to get on the podcast for a while. You know, everything's been crazy. It's been a busy year, and there's been a lot of conflicting time differences. But yeah, so today we have the managing director of Andpeople, Andrew. So Andrew, how are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to finally be here. It's good to finally have this conversation. I know we've got a lot to talk about. So look, for people who don't know, or what Andpeople is and what Andpeople do, could you just give a little summary or give an explanation of what you guys do over there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in its simplest form, we're a creative agency of youth culture specialists. Mm-hmm. So the business was really founded and created on this simple understanding that youth culture needed a specialist agency to understand and engage with it. So for us, the approach is always consumer first. So taking cultural intelligence and consumer insights and creating the most, creative ideas which create the most value for the audience from there. So yeah, we approach it as sort of a media agnostic business. We don't specialize in a specific channel, but we specialize in the audience and putting their needs first, I guess.
Yeah. And I think you talked about something very important, cultural intelligence. And, understanding brands and understanding their position right now in the market. And now it's crazy now because, issues that we had in the beginning of the year are completely different to issues that we have now. And things are evolving. And I think businesses have had to evolve so much in such a small period of time now. But what do you mean when you say cultural intelligence?
What I mean is an understanding, of what's happening in the world, an understanding of what is important to young people, the values, the beliefs, the systems that they hold close to their heart, what they want to see change, and the role that brands and businesses can play in that. Mm-hmm. And I think you've got kind of like an audience segment that's already grown up with brands. Maybe if you go sort of 2 generations back, brands didn't play such a critical role and such an important role in people's lives. And with that comes different expectations of them. And I think that's the opportunity now, is that the role that brands and business can play in catalyzing real change in the future. And that's essentially what a lot of what's happening right now is in retaliation to. It's in retaliation to a broken system. It's a retaliation to a passive approach from different businesses in not necessarily being a solution to these problems, but perpetuating these problems in the first place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. I think that definitely, I think a lot of brands have been able to capitalize off culture which they don't necessarily try to invest in. So, if they're a beneficiary of it, but they don't actually spend their time in getting to know the audience. They don't take their time in actually getting to know what their issues are. They don't take their time in actually investing in trying to find sort of, like you said, solutions to those type of different issues. So yeah, it is a very interesting time now. And I'm keen to see what type of brands, whether that be in streetwear, whether that be in different types of creative studios, what type of things are they developing and come out of. But, let's talk about you a little bit. So can you talk a little bit about your background and sort of where you're from?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Durban in South Africa, which is a fairly large, medium to large size city on the east coast of South Africa. Fairly tropical climate, a lot of good beaches, a lot of surfing, a lot of outdoor lifestyle. Fairly multicultural city, so large Black and Indian population. Late 1800s, a lot of indentured Indians came over to work on the sugarcane fields, and essentially stayed and kind of grew the culture and the diversity from there. And yeah, I guess I came from like a fairly privileged background, but it was never really an assumed privilege. My parents, my dad ran his own business, and my mom was a teacher and tennis coach, and they always kind of enforced in us that success is not assumed. You really needed to work hard and dedicate yourself to something in order to realize some form of success off it. So, yeah, we were fortunate enough to go on nice holidays and go to good schools, but we were really told and taught that hard work breeds success.
Yeah.
I play. Well, my parents were both very sporty. So my dad was a professional soccer player when he was younger. My mom a professional tennis player. So sport was always going to play, I guess, a key role in our lives growing up. I had showed at least a little bit of promise when it came to sport. My dad was probably a bit upset when he had to relinquish the soccer coaching reins and admit that I was a better tennis player. So I grew up playing tennis, and a lot of my teens was spent traveling overseas, playing different tournaments, and I guess being exposed to different cultures and different people, which really built an understanding, I guess, of different cultures and what that means, and I think probably helped set myself up a lot for sort of how I think today. In terms of my early working career, so I was fortunate enough to be sponsored by Adidas through tennis, and when my tennis career came to a fairly abrupt end, it was an opportunity to kind of get into the working world, and I got a job at Adidas South Africa. And this was kind of back in 2010 when Adidas Originals had just launched globally. So it was a new sub-brand, new lifestyle brand, which for a very traditional German sports company was fairly kind of unknown territory. And my role at the time was to essentially take this brand and grow it in a sustainable way in the local market. And that role involved a lot of different things, from sales to marketing to product, and kind of gave me a pretty good grounding, I guess, for what goes into sort of building a brand from the ground up. And yeah, when I sort of first started on Adidas, it was like a €0 business. It's now a multi-billion euro business, and it's very different. But yeah, what I was responsible for doing was kind of building product ranges, building the distribution network outside of the traditional sports environment, which as I said was kind of foreign to most people. So you felt a little bit like a man on an island in that organization in the early days, working on the originals brand.
So working at Adidas at that period of time, where obviously it's not the company that it is now. Obviously it was a big company back then, and now it is what it is. Sort of what was sort of some of your sort of role there? What was your role, and what was some of the things you were doing there during that period of time?
Yeah, as I said, it was kind of broad in the beginning. As I kind of grew and developed within the company, became a lot more specific and focused more around building teams. Once we had an established network, and obviously as the brand started growing globally, it was a lot clearer of where it wanted to go. I worked in everything from sales to marketing to product ranging to management. I was fortunate enough at the time to be given an opportunity to move to Adidas Australia. Yeah. In a marketing role, and I guess that was my in terms of moving to Oz. I had another in, and that was my wife, who is Australian. So
that was that was a little convenient.
So we met in America when I went to college over there on a tennis scholarship, and she was on a university exchange. So that kind of brought us sort of full circle back to Australia. Kind of at Adidas was interesting because in the beginning, no one really knew what to do with this brand, and it really grew. It grew really quickly. So you were kind of a bit of a jack of all trades, which I guess is kind of similar to what I'm doing at the moment in terms of running your own business.
So what, during that period of time, or that early period of time, what do you think really sparked the increase of, I guess, interest in Adidas? because definitely, now we see it as, one of the biggest brands in the world, and they have such a cultural impact in regards to whether that's their merch or all their campaigns that they do, so focused on the community. But during that period of time when it was developing and it was starting, what do you reckon was the reason why it grew so quickly?
Probably a few things. I think it was something new, something different, something unexpected. You also had, this kind of traditional brand now playing in culture. And there's a lot of sort of well-documented moments in time through the 80s and 90s where Adidas played a role outside of just sport. And I think that's where things for brands get interesting, is when they sort of start transcending culture into different areas, whether that's music or fashion or art or design or whatever it is. And yes, as I said, for Adidas, there's sort of some key moments where the brand, I guess, was adopted by completely different consumers or completely different segments, which kind of took it into a new cultural sphere.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, especially Adidas playing, a bigger role outside of, let's just say, merch and outside of, let's just say, the sporting field. There were key moments where they played positions in culture during cultural moments where, I guess it was probably at those period of times, it wasn't the popular, probably it wasn't the popular stance, or it wasn't the stance that everyone was going for. So it's interesting that you say that, because I'm seeing it now with a couple of brands who are sort of being very staunch in their perspective and very open to, what's going on with the community. But yeah, so that being said, now you've come over to Australia. How did you get involved with Andpeople, and how did that process happen?
Yeah, it was sort of part of the time that I spent at Adidas. And if I kind of rewind back to when we first started in 2010 was when South Africa hosted the Soccer World Cup, which again, like, big cultural moment globally. And when I was working on Adidas Originals at the time, we were asked by Global to essentially activate the brand over the course of the Soccer World Cup on ground in Cape Town. And we took over a 3-story warehouse building outside Cape Town, and we sort of converted it into this community center, really. And I guess looking back at it at the time, we didn't really know what we were doing, but we knew that we knew that we wanted to create a space that could bring people together around a shared interest or shared passion for soccer.
Yeah.
And do that through the lens of a brand, which the brand was there to facilitate that moment for people. Yeah. So we had an apartment on the top floor which screened every single game live. We had a pop-up gallery, pop-up store. We had a skate park. So it was really this home away from home for people to come and enjoy the Soccer World Cup. And I guess what that taught me was the power of building communities around something. Yeah. And I think that for me is something that's always translated, I guess, into what Andpeople is right now. And the reason for me kind of telling that story was post that Soccer World Cup, I went into a lot of discussions with Mike, who founded the agency, about the opportunity for an agency to really specialize in youth culture engagement or activation. An agency that really understood the audience and knew what they wanted to get and could create value for them. So we had some initial discussions kind of post that and identified the opportunity for this media agnostic kind of consumer-centric agency. And at the time, we were both sort of working brand side, and we were both kind of frustrated with sitting in meeting rooms with 6 different agencies, whether that's digital, ad, social media specialists, PR specialists, event agencies, who were all great at what they did, and all specialists in their field, but none of them really understood the audience, or there was never really ever a consideration in any of the creative sessions that we had about what does the audience want to get out of this. It was always taking whatever the brand objectives were, whatever their measures of success were, and then trying to find creative solutions for that. And there was never a discussion about what does the consumer want to get out of this. So for us, that was kind of like the catalyst, I guess, for seeing the need and the opportunity for a consumer agency.
Yeah, and you've said this a couple of times, but why youth? Why youth specifically? Why does Andpeople have such a focus on youth? And Because even some of the even some of the content that's produced at Andpeople, what I've noticed is one, it's very appealing to young creatives. I think that's a big upside, but it also gives a lot of young creatives a platform to sort of leverage whatever art they're putting out, and also gives them a spotlight to what they're doing. I think oftentimes people get a bit discouraged based on views and likes and things like that, and because of that, that sort of shapes their perception of whether their art is good or whether what they're producing is good. So why is there such a big emphasis on youth?
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple, to be honest. Like that sort of segment is the next generation.
Yeah.
In terms of like, you've got an audience who, from a commercial perspective, has huge value. It's the next generation of creative thinkers and leaders. And the audience size is growing exponentially and will be the biggest, essentially the biggest generation in the next 10 years. So from that perspective, for us, it's always obvious that you would need to focus on the next generation.
Yeah.
So youth engagement was the catalyst for that. And that's really been our focus, about sort of championing the underdog or championing the next generation, and creating a platform for them to be able to grow and develop.
Okay. So now that you've come, now coming to Australia and obviously having those conversations with Mike about establishing Andpeople overseas, what was it like early in Australia? How was it like establishing a creative agency? Do you think that Australia sort of had the appetite for that at that time?
I mean, I've always thought Australia's kind of quite a traditional country, and it still is stuck in some old ways. I think it has the opportunity to be like really future thinking, really groundbreaking, and really experimental. But I think it is still kind of stuck in some traditional ways of thinking. But yeah, in the beginning, when we first started the business, I guess you identify an opportunity and a need. You go into something with enough naivety and enough belief that it will succeed, and you understand that you're going to make some mistakes and fail along the way, which we have and will continue to do, I'm sure. But for us in the beginning, it was tough. I think a lot of the times you feel like you're championing this cause which no one else is, but it is something that you really believe in, and it does take time for the market sometimes to catch up to where you want to go and where you want to be.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, talking about Australia being stuck in this traditional ways, I'm sort of in the same mentality as you. I think that we have a lot of, especially more specifically in Sydney, we have a lot of creatives here. But a lot of the issues that they face is that, for example, if you're trying to host a party, the actual event won't allow you to host a party in there because they don't want to have a bunch of kids in there. Or, for example, if you want to host a space or a gallery, the space won't actually hold you because they don't see that, they don't see the value in, for example, arts and creativity. Even now, even with COVID hitting, the most impacted industry was the arts or entertainment industry. So how do you think we get past that traditional thinking, and why do you think that's there?
I think we get past it by building understanding, and I think you kind of touched on this before, but that comes through building empathy. And I think we kind of speak about this next generation. You've got a generation that's kind of born with an entirely different set of values and beliefs, and you have another generation who is trying to protect what they've created. And with that comes tension. And we see it every day all around us. And I think what the opportunity is someone or some kind of intermediary who can interpret, and communicate those differences. And trying to find sort of some, I guess, kind of middle ground as to what that looks like. And that's, I guess, what we see ourselves as sometimes, as this conduit between two different stakeholders. On the one hand, you've got these brands and businesses or companies who sort of trying to grow, and then you've got this audience who's trying to look for value, and you're trying to find some common creative ground in between that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue. I think it's that communication. I think there's a massive communication background between, for example, so young arty creatives, and then sort of brands who are looking for those young arty creatives. Think companies like Andpeople sort of play that position where they can sort of sit in the middle and communicate that. But other than that, there's not too many, I guess, mediums or other agencies who are able to sort of bring those two groups together, if that makes sense. And especially in a place like Australia, which, like you said, I think very traditional in terms of the mindset. And then you have a young generation of immigrants, for example, coming with all these different flavors, all these different types of new things. There's definitely going to be, I guess, not conflict, but there's definitely going to be a lot of miscommunication during the early periods and the early stages. So,
well, there's like a misunderstanding, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think what we sort of touched on before was that like there's a fundamental expectation difference now with young consumers and their expectations of brands.
Yeah.
And a lot of brands haven't really realized that. They haven't really acknowledged the role that they need to play in creating a better world for the next generation to come into.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to take more responsibility for that. Like you can see the protests that are going on. Like it's not something that you can just ignore anymore. And I think they're going to have to take more responsibility for how they act and commit to real change. Like this is real shit for people.
Yeah.
And they expect brands and businesses to take action.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought that up also, because even now you're definitely seeing a lot of brands, especially with the whole, for example, the social media blackout, posts and things like that, and posting things about, I guess, Black Lives Matter and everything that's happening now. But at the end of the day, I think everything has to come down to like constructive action plans, and what are you actually doing as a brand? Do you actually have some sort of diversity plans within your organizations, or do you actually have any, if your brand is based around community and your brand is based around a particular culture, how are you engaging with those people, and how are you trying to make your community better? In essence, how are you making your community better? And what are you doing as a brand with the platform that you have to spread a message of, I guess, a message of positivity, a message of substance, rather than you just trying to push content out? Because I've seen brands who they're still trying to push content out, and and one thing that you notice is that people aren't receptive to it right now. It doesn't really matter what you're putting out right now. You could be the best piece of clothing, best song, or whatever it is. People are not receptive to that right now, because they're more receptive to brands who are taking a step back and reflecting within themselves, reflecting into what they've been doing over the last 5 to 10 years, and being honest with themselves. Because I've seen some clothing brands, and they've been honest. They've been saying that, they said, look, for the last 5, 10 years, we have not done a good enough job.
Yeah.
But we are going to try to do a better job.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what people like to see. Those are action plans. Those are things that, really help us at least take a step forward.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing. It has to go beyond a black tile and a hashtag.
Yeah.
And that's what I sort of spoke about before. The expectation now is that we can't change everything overnight, and it's going to take time.
Yeah.
These are like societal issues, problems that have been created over decades and generations. So it's not going to happen overnight, and it's definitely not going to happen on social media. What's going to have to happen is, as you say, this commitment to real change, and businesses and brands understanding the role that they need to play in creating that change. And that starts with looking under your own hood.
Yeah.
And looking at your diversity policies in your company, and what your hiring policies are, and what your leadership team looks like, the language that you use. It's all of those kind of things which internally everyone has to kind of ask those difficult questions and commit to making or taking action against it.
Yeah. What do you think we're going to see? I know it's quite a broad question, but what do you think we're going to see from brands in the next 5 to 6 months?
Next 5 to 6 months, what we'll see from, that is a tough question.
Yeah.
I know what we would like to see from brands.
Yeah.
That's going to take more than 6 months, I believe. What I would like and what we would like as a business to see from brands, I think, is taking more of an empathetic approach to what they do. Building empathy requires understanding. Understanding requires insight, listening, learning, and that takes time.
Yeah.
But I think what is clear to me is that brands are going to play a more important role in the future.
Yeah.
And it will take some time for them to understand and realize that, and understand and realize that their purpose needs to go beyond just the product.
Yeah.
And their purpose needs to go beyond just the transaction, and that they can play a role in creating real change in the world in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see. I do think that we're slowly trying to move in the right direction. I think the first thing that needs to happen is the conversation needs to start, and I think the conversation has at least started. But look, I think that what you were just saying sort of just leads into my next question: is why do you think it is important to create campaigns which focus on these type of dilemmas, whether that be, for example, climate change, whether that be what's happening right now with Black Lives Matter, or just creating campaigns with focusing on real life issues?
I think it's important because that's what people care about right now.
Yeah.
And as I've said, it's like the expectation right now is that businesses and brands need to care about it as well, because they need to be part of the solution. And this is real life stuff, and it's impacting people on a daily basis. And I think a lot of people are just tired of that.
Yeah.
And they're looking for some support and looking for some help from different brands and businesses.
Yeah, but it's gonna be interesting time. It's gonna be interesting. It's interesting to see what's gonna happen. But look, even from a personal perspective, this goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, starting Andpeople. And obviously saying at the beginning of when you were starting Andpeople, it was a tough time, just like every business goes through a tough time. Could you just sort of go through sort of some of the things that you guys went through during that period of time, and then how you sort of overcame that?
Yeah, I think the difficult things in the beginning are, apart from the standard like small business setup challenges that you have with trying to do everything yourself and trying to build cash flow and build a client base that's reliable and sustainable from a month-on-month basis with regards to income. But I think, like some of the challenges are always sort of perception and scale. Yeah. It's definitely something that we're trying to fix. I think the scalability of a business always depends on a lot of factors. And I think when you don't have essentially like a cash investment into the business, you're always just going to kind of organically and slowly grow, which I do believe is the right approach. And then I guess the perception thing is to sort of change people's thinking away from this like media-centric approach to marketing to a consumer-centric approach. Mm-hmm. And even 5 years later, we sort of still feel that that our positioning is still somewhat different and somewhat unique. Mm-hmm. But I think what's key for us is, just being able to be true to who you are, and not losing sight of that along the way.
And besides that, why do you think that Andpeople's positioning is so unique? Because I see it, but for people who don't sort of understand the scope of what's happening, can you sort of explain that? Why do you think it's so unique?
Well, I think
there's a time where you can talk nice about Andpeople now.
I think it's unique because, I think there's a few reasons. Like, I think we're honest. Yeah. We're transparent. And we're intentional. Yeah. And I think we're clear of those intentions. And I think that for me is the exciting thing. It's like we know who we are. We know what we're capable of, and we're intentional about what we do. Yeah. And we're honest about our successes, and we're honest about our failures. Yeah. And that's something that we instill in everyone in the business, in the company. We're going to make mistakes, and if you just admit to them, and we can move on and learn from it. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Tough question.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. You answered it perfectly, no. So continuing that, how do you incorporate that with some of your partnerships? Because most notably, you guys partner with JD Sports. So how do you sort of foster that relationship with JD Sports, and how do you get them to sort of buy into sort of the concept of Andpeople and being customer orientated?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to, I guess, mutually aligned values. And then trust. I think, what we try and instill in our partners is, I guess, this idea of like being a creative consultant, and then being able to trust in what we do, trust in the executional excellence, trust in the ideas, trust in the intent. And I think that comes a lot of times with people just sort of letting go of their own like egos and their own ways of thinking and trusting in what other people think and do. A lot of our relationship is kind of built on that. I mean, you've got mature marketers who understand their positioning in market. They understand the audience, and they also understand the role that they need to play as a retail partner. And then they trust us to kind of bring the right ideas across, that engages that community and builds that community for them.
Yeah. And I guess as working for a creative agency, and obviously doing everything that's, it's very arty, very arts focused. How do you balance between art and the business side of things? I think that, sometimes whenever I bring in someone who, for example, like yourself, who sort of is managing a creative studio or a creative collective. One of the things that always fascinates me, and I know it fascinates a lot of people, is that, you can be an extremely arty person and there's a lot of things probably you want to push out. But at the same time, you need to be able to balance that art with things which actually make sense business-wise, which you can package in different things. So how do you find the balance between that? Especially because I know Andpeople, there's a bunch of great creatives, and there's always great ideas flowing. How do you find that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and that's a difficult challenge. The way we balance it is, I guess, finding the right commercial partners that, as I said before, you can have consistent work. It enables you to focus and invest the right resources into servicing those kind of businesses or those commercial entities. And then at the same time, you can carve off enough time with the team to focus on what matters to you as a business or as a brand. And I think that's where we get the balance right, is that we invest the right amount of time in building the commercial base that we need to service the financial needs of the business. But then we also have, I guess, a very clear purpose of what we stand for and what we want to achieve on our own. And we invest in that financially as well. So, I would say always make sure that you're not spending 100% of your time chasing your commercial tail, and that you do find and carve off some investment to be able to put into yourself as a brand and as a business.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because that's something definitely that I feel like I struggle with. Not necessarily struggle with, but I'm more focused on getting the art side. But I think as you grow, you realize that you need to have a sort of commercial aspect, and it's not necessarily selling out whatever you're doing. It's just finding a way to to package your whatever you're doing to different people, and put it into different markets. Yeah,
I was always told this one great saying is like you can die in beauty, but you still die.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Is like you have to be able to commercially support the needs of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And on the outside, it can look really pretty and shiny and nice, but you're going to have to do some dirty work sometimes to make some money.
Yeah, that's the reality of things. I like the way you put that. You still got to die pretty. You still got to die either way. Okay, no worries. Yeah, so how do you guys find good people? Because a lot of for a lot of people who watch the podcast, they know Trav, who works over at Andpeople, is the one who curated sort of the podcast, and he's great because I see a lot of similarities with you in terms of persona and the way that he views sort of things. But how do you find good people? How do you find a good team, and then how do you sort of align? How do you sort of align their values with what Andpeople are about?
Yeah, I think that's, as you said, it kind of comes down to this sort of mutual value exchange, or understanding people's values and seeing whether that aligns from a business perspective. Because I think that's the challenge sometimes for people, is they kind of see maybe an agency or a brand or a business and they're like, oh, that looks really cool, I'd love to work there. Yeah. And then they quickly get frustrated and realize that it's not really for them. Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to not really being true to yourself and what your values are, or you're trying to force yourself into a place that doesn't really fit. So what we look for in people is honesty, and I guess there's an element of skill in finding the right people. Yeah. Like naturally we would attract, or hope we would attract, really good, talented, young creative people who would want to work in a studio or in an agency. But then it's kind of like getting a little bit deeper with each of them and understanding really where they want to be, what their objectives are, what is their personal purpose. Yeah. And does their personal purpose align with our business purpose? Because when those two things are singing from the same hymn sheet, you really do get the best out of people. Yeah. And a lot of the guys will come into work and say, it doesn't really feel like I'm working here. It's kind of it's just what I do, and we have a lot of fun, and we work with great clients and do great things.
It's vibes.
And yeah, I think, and that's for me probably the most exciting thing, is that when people can come to work and they don't feel like they're working. Yeah. It's kind of the feeling that I've had for 15 years, I guess.
It was a good feeling.
Or 20 years of, I mean, there's a lot of pain in there too. Yeah. It's not like that all the time. Yeah. But it does. It just feels like, it doesn't feel like work. And that's a good place to be.
Yeah. I think that's the key. I mean, I know for a lot of people who've been watching this, a lot of people in situations where, they're working in certain places and they know that that's not the environment for them, and every day is like a labor. Yeah. Waking up.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's days I wake up and where I'm like, I just wish I did not have to process these invoices. Yeah. Like think of another way to like present this concept or idea. But those. I mean, I think if you're an inherent problem solver, which is a lot of what we do. So you're like a kind of creative, critical thinker and problem solver, then you kind of enjoy those times where things are
struggling
a little bit shit.
Yeah, I think having those weeks where every day there's an issue, but eventually there's issues that go to end, but you just got to get through every single one of them. Yeah. But do you think especially working with bigger brands and bigger corporations, do you feel as if culture and diversity is a part of do you feel as if it is sort of a marketing scheme, or do you feel as if it's something that they're actually trying to incorporate in their values and where they're going as an organization? Because I know you were talking about even you were just talking about how certain things look really shiny at the front, but really as a brand, is it really a marketing scheme and a way for you to sort of be relevant in this period of time, or a period of time any other time when something is going on? Do you feel as if culture and diversity is a marketing scheme for a lot of companies?
I mean, it's a pretty sensitive topic right now, obviously. Yeah. And I don't have all the answers, but I guess I'll give you my observations of it. And those are, I guess the simple answer to that question is, do I believe that culture and diversity are critical parts of the business or companies right now? No. And I think the reason for that is that we have widespread protest and anger, which is perpetuating daily, and that's not based on a single issue. It's an entire system that's broken. Yeah. And you can see it, and we sort of touched on this before, you can see like the low touch commitment from a lot of businesses where they feel like they're doing the right thing, and maybe in their minds they do, but the expectation is that they need to do more. So I think the simple answer to that question is no. Do I think that all business are not pure or bad in their intentions, no. I think that there's probably just a lack of empathy and understanding of what all of this really means and the role that brands and businesses need to play in that. And I think, as I said, they're going to have to care about diversity and they're going to have to care about culture because people do. And more so than ever, you've got this very empathetic generation that's growing up who see things differently. And they're demanding real change, and they have platforms to be able to do that now, which in the past you didn't necessarily. So.
And and I think what you said is spot on. Because one thing that I've noticed and what I've seen through a lot of statements, for example, certain brands they would post something then retract it, because they realize that that's not the right thing to say at the present moment. But one thing that I have noticed is exactly what you said, is just that they don't have the empathy, and then to top it off also is that they don't have the knowledge. So they don't actually have, they don't have anyone in their team who's actually having these type of conversations, or they don't have anyone who they can reach out to actually find constructive ways. Because there are a lot of people and a lot of brands also who are, playing that role where they're asking for help, they're asking for assistance, help me to understand what's going on. But there are also a lot of brands who are acting like they know. And then they're putting things out, and it's blatantly obvious that they're still a bit insensitive or don't have enough empathy for what's going on.
Yeah, and it's easy to kind of get caught up in it. And we had a lot of discussions about it, and where do we stand from a business perspective? And our approach was we need to listen. And we have a voice and we have an opinion and we have a very clear purpose. But for us, the most important thing to do right now is to listen. And to build understanding and read and watch and do all the things that you need to do to better educate yourself. And we don't proclaim to have all the answers, and no one really does. But I think what is important is that we just listen and understand. And then take whatever necessary course of action you feel is right for yourself. It's hard. There's no right or wrong way. And that's what, as I say, I think people's intentions are right, but it's far more complex than that.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's still evolving, right? Like you said, this year has been a crazy year for any small business. Being forced to adapt because of COVID, and some businesses completely changing the whole business model. And then after that, with all the riots and the protesting and, what's happening with Black Lives Matter, that's really forced a business to also then think about what type of direction that they're going for. How are they also community building? So I think it's obviously going to take a bit of time before, anyone and everyone can really process what's going on. Or not process, but so sort of build upon what's going on and really start to build, some of their core values and, where they're sort of trying to go with what they're doing. But that being said, also going back to Andpeople and their focus on youth, do you think that the youth are inspired by the older generations, or do you feel like they're not really inspired by it? How do we close that gap?
That intergenerational communication break.
That we were just talking about. How do we close that gap? And what does it mean? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would hope that the youth are inspired by older generations. I think there'll be examples of really great people who have done great things, who young people would look up to. I'm getting significantly older. I have 2 young kids. I would hope that the youth would look up to me. But yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one to answer. I think everything sort of evolves from a place, and people will look back on this and hopefully see this as a time where we can really reassess and rethink and reprioritize what's important, and be able to take action for the next generation that essentially leaves this place in a better spot.
And do you think that we're leaving this? Do you think we're on track to leaving just the next generation in a better path or in a better track?
I would hope so. I mean, I think all of these things are really interesting. I mean, it's a world in crisis, but I think at the same time, it's it's a world that needs this crisis.
Yeah.
It needs to go to this place to truly like start to create meaningful change.
Yeah.
And so, I would say yes, hopefully we are. I think it's going to take a lot of younger people coming into decision-making positions and having seats at tables which can generally push the needle and change a lot of policy and whatever else. But I think younger people will definitely have a kind of critical role in the next kind of 10 years as to where we end up.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, I guess where can people find Andpeople, and where can people get this information and see what's going on?
You can find us in Surrey Hills at our studio on Burke Street, corner of Burke and Favaux. Pop in anytime, Studio 16. We welcome anyone to come and say hello.
Yeah.
Within safe restrictions.
Yeah, don't be weird.
But you can find us on our website, which is andpeople.com. You can get our Instagram, which is andpeople, and andpeople_AU. And get in touch. Andrew at andpeople.com. That's my email address. Send me an email. Happy to answer any questions or chat further.
Okay. No worries. So look, thank you very much, Andrew. I think this conversation was really good. And it was great.
Thanks, Dino.
All right. Thank you.